How does the product owner get supported by the Scrum Master? This is one question I get asked every time. The product owner is that content authority on the team that is responsible for determining the priority of work for the team. In other words, he or she is the voice of the customer or VOC. Now, what does that mean? It means that when the person who goes out to interact with the business to get those important requirements and shares that vision of that product, because he or she has a close relationship with the business, can share that vision back to say, this is what the customer is really looking for, and use that information to prioritize with the team on important work. That's the product owner. And that is a lot of work. It demands empathy. Empathy because the business has expectations. Sometimes the business, being very far removed from the team, would have expectations of what should and should not happen, meaning they want things yesterday. And the product owner is the person that is responsible for managing that relationship and resetting expectations where necessary. A tough job. So the Scrum Master supports the product owner on this journey by looking at opportunities where the product owner might be lacking and coach the product owners there. As an example, when I used to be a Scrum Master, my product owner might struggle with prioritization. Has lots of work. The question is, which of this work is important? Well, he doesn't know. All of them are important. Left for him, he or she wants it done and done yesterday. Well, as a Scrum Master, your job is to protect the team from just that. And so the only way to go around this is to coach the product owner. And this means you have to, first of all, be able to establish some relationship of some sort, build that bridge with the product owner so that he or she can be comfortable to accept that coaching from you. And when you have been able to build that bridge, building that bridge takes some work, of course, because it starts with trust. It gets them to the point where they think that they can work with you. If you can build that bridge, then you can say, well, if I'm your trusted advisor, I would advise you that we can tackle this issue of prioritization differently. And then the product owner might be much more receptive to the coaching or counsel that you would have. I'll take that back. You, as a Scrum Master, have to develop a trusted advisor relationship with your product owner to be taken seriously, for your counsel, suggestion, or advice to be accepted or even considered. Well, what does that mean? It means that when you join the team as a Scrum Master, you are intentional. You are intentional about building that relationship with the product owner, knowing that you would be coaching this product owner on the agile best practices. And so, but he or she will not just accept coaching from you just like that. You have to build that relationship. Being a trusted advisor means being at that point where the person understands that the advice you are giving is not for your selfish interest, but towards the betterment of the team, towards helping them achieve their goal. But you only get there with time when through little acts, it's the little things, the devil is in the details, they say. It's through those little acts of kindness, those little acts of intentionally helping servant leadership, through servant leadership, helping the product owner achieve his goal, his outcome, supporting. It could be something as simple as, hey, how about I see you are struggling with this? How about I help you? Let me take up some work off your plate. You would do this, I would do this. Genuinely supporting. Now, this has nothing to do with coaching. I just joined the team. I'm building that relationship. I want to work with you and figure out how can I help you make your life easier, Mr. or Mrs. Product Owner. And build that relationship. It takes days, weeks to build that relationship. And then the product owner now suspends suspicion. Because, of course, you are new to the team. He or she suspends suspicion and say, I think this person is out for my best interest. I think this person has my interest at heart. And that's where the relationship starts. Of course, it's more complex than this, but at a high level, you build that relationship. And so when you eventually see that the product owner is struggling, for example, the backlog is not healthy, the product owner has struggles with identifying what is priority for the team, you can start making those recommendations about how the product owner can get a deep backlog or how the product owner can prioritize. You could start introducing techniques like, the Kano analysis, although that's a very advanced technique, some product owners might not be there yet. You can use a very simple technique like the what is this one? Moscow. That skipped me for a second. Yeah, the Moscow technique, where you could, Moscow being must have, should have, won't have, and could have. Moscow, a simple technique like that, where the product owner builds a quadrant and saying, if you have 20 features or 20 user stories or whatever it is that you need to prioritize, list them out and then put a quadrant. On the top here is must, here is could, here is won't, here is should. So where does feature 1 fall into in this quadrant? Oh, feature 1 is a must. Oh, perfect. Boom. What about feature 2? Feature 2 is a should, okay? And you go through that list, and before you know it, you identify what must be done for the team. That's one technique. There are other techniques basically that some people use, especially when they're talking about budgetary stories. They use money, monopoly money. If you have $1,000 and you want to spend that money on these features, which of these features would you spend $100? And then the product owner now gets into understanding the game that you are looking for priority. And he gets into the weeds and say, okay, this feature is going to be $100. This is a $300 feature. And before you know it, you are trying to constrain him or her to spending $1,000 on this feature, but then doing so in priority. So if you have $1,000 to spend, how would you spend it on these 10 features, where each of these features are, a certain cost, a certain amount? Long and short of it is you get the product owner to think about the quality, the priority, the importance of the feature. And then if you help him get to that point, he can take that information back to the team and say, hey team, these are the priorities. So these are ways that you will be able to coach the product owner. You're coaching on priority, coaching on healthy backlog development, coaching on dealing with stakeholders, because the stakeholders are going to be constantly putting a lot of pressure on the product owner. So your job basically is to help the product owner to manage that stress and reset stakeholders' expectation. You're going to be coaching on how to demo, solutions, how frequently, you want to get the product owner to coach the team to demo. You want to coach the product owner so we've talked about prioritization, we've talked about backlog health, we've talked about stakeholder management. Another thing also that could be useful for the product owner could be critical thinking, not critical thinking, design thinking. I meant, design thinking. Where you can start introducing, of course, as you build that relationship, elements of design thinking, problem space thinking, and problem space analysis and design thinking. This is more like an advanced level conversation with the product owner. But the idea here is, to get the product owner to start thinking in form of developing empathy maps, root cause analysis, teaching the product owner, coaching the product owner on root cause analysis techniques that they can use to troubleshoot and solve problems. You can also do persona development. Yes, another one that the product owner usually finds useful. I can build persona, which is the customer persona. Gary is a 37-year-old white male who lives in this region, a suburban region. And Gary is a customer who is very finicky, likes this or likes that. Build that persona so that when a team is building their development work, they would be able to align their work with the interest or the taste of the customer that they're building. That. So you coach the product on persona development so that he or she can be able to use that for the team. And that useful technique that you could also coach the product owner on could be story mapping, where he or she is taught useful techniques on how they can map the story or map the work, in the sense that, okay, these are the features, these are the stories that goes under these features, these are the tasks that goes under these stories, and this is how this feature still lines up with the epics. And so that mapping is essential so everybody can see the relationship and interrelationship between the work and how it flows. This is crucial, especially when you are trying to identify dependencies, intra-team dependencies, meaning dependencies that happen within the team. So, how does this story impact this story? If this story is going to be done in future sprints, okay, what is the correlation, and how do we ensure that we have the right runway, architecturally speaking, to support both pieces of work? And so, design thinking and critical thinking, system thinking, where you get them to see the big picture. MVPs, how they should start thinking about MVPs, which is minimum viable product. Don't just think about building an entire solution. Build solutions towards MVPs where you can test something end to end for the customer's benefit. You know, um, story writing, it's another technique where you can introduce the product owner to say, as you write your stories, think about writing your stories in a way that they are very clear. Think about using effective techniques to develop the acceptance criteria so that the teams understand, what the acceptance criteria are. For teams I've coached in the past or product owners I've worked with in the past, I've talked about, you know, using techniques like BDD, which is a subset of extreme programming. The concept is, get them to write stories that are testable. Because when stories are testable, the testers or the QAs within the team will be able to test those stories. They'll be able to write their test cases. They'll be able to test those stories. They'll be able to test those features as intended, running what we refer to as the positive or the negative test scenarios. And then you can also, another thing that you could also work with your product owner on, aside the user story, creative thinking, critical thinking, system thinking, MVP, estimates, prioritization. You might also be able to help your product owner with, let me see, what else have I not talked about? You can help your product owner also with, show and tell. I think we've talked about show and tell. I think that's the proof of concept. Um, but if we haven't, the idea at a high level is the product owner should be able to show, a minimum viable product to the business, and he or she should get into the habit of doing these demos very frequently. So user story writing, BDD is one. Much later, you can coach the team to try TDD, which is test-driven development, but that's a team conversation. The product owner is more on the BDD side, where he or she thinks about writing those user stories and to be clear and testable. Oh, one last thing. Sprint goals. When the product owner is coming up with the sprint goals and working with the teams through the sprint goals, one of the things you need to coach the product owner on is how he or she can write SMART goals. SMART goals are those goals that are small, measurable. You know how they drill on SMART, the acronym. So the product owner can start thinking about writing stories that are smart, writing the sprint goals that are smart. That way, he or she can start quantifying the work in a way where the team can see how they can test the work The story is small enough so that it can flow through the sprint or the iteration. The story is small in a way that the story is sized because of the smart M being measurable. The story is sized in a way where at the end of the sprint, we can know the team's velocity and the capacity moving into the sprint, and the team start getting towards a healthy way of working and being agile. So, ladies and gentlemen, those are the few things that you can coach the product owners on that I can remember at this point in time. But there is more, of course. But as you evolve this relationship and build upon this relationship with the product owner gets better at his function, his role, and the team benefits from it. So, the Scrum Master has to be very intentional when they are coaching the product owner through these gray areas.